Hey, Al McCoy here, and you are listening to the Solar Panel, the Phoenix Suns show.
You're watching the Solar Panel podcast. Make sure that you subscribe to the full version of the podcast wherever you do listen to podcasts, Google Play, iTunes, anything like that. I am Tim Tompkins. Dave King, the managing editor, Brightside the Sun, Greg Esposito, joining us for this episode. So the Suns, after acquiring Austin Rivers in a trade, sending Trevor Ariza over to the Wizards, have decided to waive him, saying, you know what, out of all of our needs on this roster, a point guard was not one of them.
Austin Rivers was never a point guard.
Okay.
Oh God, Austin Rivers is a worse passer than most anyone, even guys that are currently on the Suns.
I'm going to defend the Phoenix Suns here. They probably realized that Austin Rivers was just going to be a dick here in Phoenix. Didn't want to be here, so they said, I'm not going to deal with this. And it, honestly, when you look at what's happened over this last week, they're starting to build chemistry. And the last thing you need is a veteran pouting because he doesn't want to be here. That's why they got rid of Trevor Ariza. So why would you want to add another version?
And Brandon Knight
of
before
that?
him, and Eric Bledsoe before him, and yeah, I think look, if the current situation of the Suns is that players are likely not to want to be here, not going to want to be here if they're a veteran and they've been around other organizations, because there are things about the Suns organization that are a little sketchy. So what's different, it seems like, about James Jones than Ryan McDonough is Ryan McDonough would take that as a personal challenge and would call out the guy in public and try to berate him into wanting to be on the team. And then the Suns would suffer through. I mean, y'all might remember Markieff Morris's saga, and then you might remember Brandon Knight's pouting, and then you might remember, player after player after player wanting out and not being outed or gotten out for way too long. And this year, what you're seeing is James Jones actually taking action on those things. Tyson Chandler left on a fairly good note, probably because Tyson Chandler was about to not be a good note. And then now you've got Austin Rivers being released before he can even possibly become a problem. So James Jones apparently has decided that he'd rather guys with good attitudes and less talent than guys with more talent and bad attitudes.
Hey, I still wish that James Jones would have come out and said Austin Rivers a punk. Like, that should have been the quote in the press.
I like James a little. In some ways, I don't like how James Jones talks, because he's one of those guys who will just use his platitude and platitude and platitude. But I do kind of like that press release when they did release Austin Rivers, that they mutually agreed that Austin Rivers would be a better asset on a more veteran team. This is 26-year-old Austin Rivers, who isn't even a starting caliber guard, couldn't even start for the Washington Wizards. Yeah, they've got John Wall and Bradley Beal, but Austin Rivers was terrible for the 12 and 18 Wizards, and he thinks he's too good for the Suns. Screw you. Go. We mutually agree you're better on a team that doesn't need you.
I love PR spin. That was James Jones saying this guy's a dick, and PR went, we've mutually agreed to not have him here.
That's the little passive aggressive. Look at how this fucking conversation went, people. I love it.
That's how I used to describe breakups. We mutually decided to part ways, when really she was like, you don't satisfy me, I'm leaving. All right.
Well, that's exactly it. And so you spin it, but you spin it in such a way that everyone knows what really happened. Can you imagine? Can you imagine James Jones? I'm making all this up, but James Jones goes, all right, sure, we'll take Austin Rivers as the trade piece. And my guess is that Washington wanted more compensation back for Oubre. So they tried to spin Oubre off to the Grizzlies, and the Suns said, okay, fine. Dylan Brooks isn't bad. So they were going to agree to it. Not that the Suns did not want Oubre. It's that probably the Wizards wanted more for Oubre than the Suns were going to give them, which is the corpse of Trevor Ariza. So at the time, I don't think it's because the Suns really wanted Austin Rivers. I really don't. I think the Suns were going to salary match for Austin Rivers just to get Trevor off the team. And then when Rivers calls up, or his agent calls up and says, Austin really would rather be on a more veteran team that he doesn't want to deal with this bullshit. So James Jones said, okay, fine. I don't give a shit. Get out of here.
Could you imagine if they had accidentally actually dealt for Marshawn Brooks and then cut Austin Rivers, the hell that would have broken loose. That they like,
Oh
hey,
my God. Yes. Imagine that. If they had just cowed down and said, okay, Marshawn Brooks, Wayne Selden, and wait, yeah, it was, wasn't it? Marshawn
yeah,
Brooks, Wayne Selden, a second round pick, and Austin Rivers to be
I don't
waived
think
later.
I don't think the second round pick was even going to the Suns. I
no,
think the second round picks were
No,
going to the
that's true.
Wizards.
That's true. It's
yeah,
going to the Wizards. So it just would have been Austin Rivers, Marshawn Brooks, and Wayne Selden. Oh my
Mm.
God.
yeah.
Now, one of the criticisms that James Jones is receiving for this deal is he got Austin Rivers cut about 600K off of his guarantee, and a lot of people are really surprised that he didn't at least get him to cut the veterans minimum off of his guarantee, since he would almost certainly uh, receive that once he did clear waivers and sign with another team.
Who cares? It doesn't impact the offseason salary cap.
Right.
They're not adding anybody this year at this point that they're gonna have to pay that much for.
It's just another sign that Rivers is being a dick. But really, something that Jared Dudley tweeted a couple of different times to different people over the last year on players being waived is, look, the player doesn't have to give up a dime.
Hmm?
It's guaranteed money. So why would you, if you've got $50 in your pocket and you wanted to leave, and the Suns and the person was going to let you walk out the door anyway, why would you take a tenner out and put it on the table before you left if you didn't have to?
Yeah.
You know, it's already in your pocket. It's already guaranteed money.
Well, and Doc worked really hard to get Austin that money, so he shouldn't have to give a dime of it back.
Which does go back to continually shock me on Ryan Anderson actually agreeing to non-guarantee $5 million of his contract next year. That was a pretty ballsy move on Anderson's part in an attempt to get some playing time with the Suns, you know, to get involved in that trade that hasn't worked out for him.
Well, Anderson's a different type of dude, though, too. He's a good guy, and he's a guy that, you know, you're not going to hear a word from him based on the situation he's in. He's a good guy. So, I think
He's
that's
also made his
different.
money.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the difference between 21 and 15 million for a guy like that's making as much as he is this year, he gets it. He understands the reality of the situation.
It is possibly money he'll never see again.
Yeah, but he also doesn't seem like a guy that's going to be one of these guys 10 years after his career that's filing for bankruptcy. So it's probably $5 million he doesn't need.
No, he's actually such a cool guy. I've had a couple of different long conversations with him off the record in the locker room, just chilling after, you know, while we're waiting up for other players to come out of the shower and stuff. He's just easy to talk to, and he has such a good frame of mind, and he's actually embracing like a Jamal Crawford. So him and Jamal Crawford are basically embracing the just be cool in the locker room, be fun, be helpful with the guys, be helpful with the schemes and the rotations and all that. And don't walk around moping all the time. He and Jamal Crawford have been excellent on that regard. And obviously the guys who are no longer with the team were not.
Well, look, and that's a point that I think needs to be made is the fact that you don't buy veteran leadership, right? It's not about paying a lot of money to bring in a Tyson Chandler or a Trevor Ariza. You can't force leadership. It's developed, it's earned, and guys like Jamal Crawford and guys like Ryan Anderson have earned the respect of these guys and have earned the respect of the game and are leaders from that perspective. So you don't need to spend, what was it, a combined 67 million between Chandler and Ariza to fill that void. They did it on a minimum contract with Jamal Crawford, and obviously Anderson had a decent amount of salary, but they took that back to make a trade work. So they need to stop trying to plug that hole with large contracts.
You know what's cool? Jamal Crawford did a little Twitter exchange with folks on Friday night, saying he had some time and he was a little talkative. And one of the questions that he was willing to answer was, what do you want to do after your playing career? Do you want to do coaching, or you want to do front office, or you want to do media? And he said
playing pickup ball at the Y.
He would kick some ass playing pickup ball at the Y. But no, what he said was front office for sure. So I think that, and he and James Jones are pretty close. So that would be really cool to see him graduate into a suit like James Jones did. I think he'd be really good in player relations.
Yeah, I need to backtrack on a comment I made via Twitter probably 6, 7 weeks ago where I said, I've seen enough of Jamal Crawford in the Suns uniform. I never need to see it again. I take it back. I was saying it because I still have a hard time, guys like that getting minutes over the young guys. But when you see what Jamal Crawford has provided to this group, and when you see how he's getting these young guys excited and talking to them during timeouts and the impact he's had on the court, I fully retract my statement, and I apologize, Isaiah Thomas, that I offended you with it enough that you responded to me on Twitter. I was wrong.
Which
You
Isaiah?
guys were right. Our former Isaiah Thomas here.
Oh, see, I
yeah,
wouldn't
his
know because he
buddies.
blocked me.
Oh, really? Yeah, he's buddies with Jamal from Seattle, being up there.
Well,
So
I always liked
uh,
Isaiah, and
uh,
I think I was just a little bit too outspoken in the year he was the backup point guard for the Suns, and he blocked me before he left and never turned me back on.
yeah, I don't think he blocked me on the Jamal comment, but I was certainly wrong with it, and I wanted to admit that.
Well, to your point, there was a time when Jamal Crawford had first joined the team where he was just eating up a lot of possessions with long mid-range twos, essentially, at the ends of shot clocks and things.
Dribbling the air out of the ball and taking a last-second shot, yeah.
Right, taking a last-second low percentage shot. And there were points in which I was like, if I never have to see him take another one of those, I'll be perfectly okay with this. Now, all the intangibles we didn't realize were going to happen. Jamal Crawford obviously hit a career high in assists the other night. So he has been playing better, and he's been real positive on and off the court. But, speaking to that tweet, there was a time in which initially he did not seem like he was going to be that much of a positive.
He's basically a very cool Brandon Knight. You know what I mean?
Yes.
He's like the locker room version you always wished Brandon Knight would be, but he's still basically Brandon Knight, because in Brandon Knight's best possible physical iteration of himself, he would be sixth man of the year like Jamal Crawford was 3 times over 18 years.
Yeah, that's very true. And the time I tweeted that was when we were still dealing with watching Tyson Chandler play all the time too. So
when he was just forcing those lobs to Tyson Chandler over and over and over, but Tyson Chandler couldn't catch any of them.
Yes. But this is a positive episode. See, I'm actually feeling like I can be positive this episode, and that's
well, we
why
can,
I want
because
to apologize.
Why are we feeling positive, guys? We haven't even mentioned it. We're 10 minutes into this episode.
Well, that's because by the time people listen to this, they may be on a losing streak again.
Right.
So let's make
When we are recording, the Suns were on a 4-game winning streak, with 2 of them being road games, 3 of them being against winning teams. We should be very proud of this team for winning 4 straight games against that competition.
And all of them being without Trevor Ariza.
Well, no, one of them was with.
Oh, that's true. One of them was in spite of Trevor Ariza.
In spite of Trevor Ariza. Well, you know what? Trevor Ariza bookended his son's career pretty well, actually, with 2 wins against and his last one with the Suns. He was 21, 8, and 7 on opening night, and he actually moved faster than an albatross. And then he walked for the next 2 months, and then he was I can't remember, but he was a catalyst for what his box score was against the Mavericks last Thursday, a week ago Thursday, and he literally bookended his career because he knew he was out. He knew he was done.
Ironically, his contract was an albatross as well, so
he played like his contract.
What's interesting to me with the Suns as far as the month of December goes, in wins, opponents are shooting 25% from 3, averaging 35 attempts, and that average of attempts from 3 is very important. In the losses, opponents are shooting 42% from 3, but are only averaging 25 attempts per game. Usually, a better indicator of defense is when it comes to 3-pointers is whether or not you can limit their attempts, not necessarily the percentage that they make when they're shooting them. So it's a little bit surprising to me that the Suns are actually winning games when opponents are shooting more from behind the arc.
Yeah, the Suns are getting a little lucky that their opponents, and you have to once every 82 games, you know? I mean, you have to get lucky sometimes, right? But they're getting lucky that their opponents are not making as many threes as they have been over the past couple of months. But here's an area where the Suns are actually doing pretty well. They are getting lucky from teams not making shots behind the 3-point line, but the Suns are also opponent points in the paint during their 4-game winning streak. They're 9th in the league with allowing only 44 per game. And everyone who's been watching all of these god-awful games all year will know that the Suns have been a layup line all season. So to be 9th over the last 4 games, for every team's last 4 games, if you do it on NBA.com, look at last 4 games, the Suns are 9th in opponent points per game in the paint. And that is a huge plus. It just also helps that they're not making percentage. That's points in the paint. So it's total points per game in the paint.
Oh, and honestly, Tim, I kind of wonder with your initial point, is that something that we're going to just see change in the NBA? Is it more an indicator of the style of ball that's being played now, that when teams are since the 3 is now such an important part of the game, when teams are missing those 3s, they start to get in a hole, they're going to tend to shoot more of those 3s, and it kind of snowballs. I think it may be an indicator that we see more moving forward, just because the game is moving to such a 3-point style game. And to Dave's point, when you have a better efficiency down low, that you're not giving up those layups because it's a 3 or it's a layup is kind of the game now, you're going to wind up seeing a team jacking up more 3s and trying to force the game there beyond the arc.
And I'm not saying the Suns are really good at rim protection right now, because they're still real mediocre, although Richaun Holmes is great at contesting as many shots as he can. And DeAndre Ayton's doing a lot better at contesting shots, but they both get switched off and rotated out and all that. So they're not always available to defend the rim. What's been great about the Suns defense is they're not letting the ball get into the paint on passes, because the long arm defenders that they've got out there now are doing an incredible job of disrupting passing lanes. And so a player now has to drive all the way from the outside to get to the paint now, instead of passing in there. That's been a lost cause for a lot of teams lately, and that's really been fun to watch.
And part of that is Richaun Holmes. So when Richaun Holmes is on the court, and this doesn't necessarily mean guarding the shot, just when he is the center playing for the Suns, opponents are shooting 2.5% less frequently at the rim, putting him in the 82nd percentile among centers. And when they are shooting at the rim, opponents are shooting almost 10.5% worse when he's on the court, putting him in the 98th percentile. So Richaun Holmes does absolutely make a difference in that center rotation on defense.
If only we could get a way to mash Richaun Holmes and DeAndre Ayton together, because if Ayton played that kamikaze kind of defense that Holmes does, it would be a game changer in terms of the perception of DeAndre Ayton and what he's able to do on the defensive end. So you can only hope that Richaun Holmes over time kind of rubs off on DeAndre Ayton, and Ayton absorbs kind of that mentality long term.
James Jones had an interesting comment in The Athletic this last week, where he was basically talking about the chemistry on the team, and I thought it was interesting. And there was an article on Bright Side of the Sun where essentially James Jones said that when DeAndre Ayton is on the court, Richaun Holmes is his biggest cheerleader, and when Richaun Holmes is on the court, DeAndre Ayton is his biggest cheerleader. Those guys really root for each other, but you can hope that he really picks it up. I could give you guys a DeAndre Ayton stat with those same ones, but I'm not going to, because I feel like it would create an argument, and this is only a positive episode.
This is a bright side of the Suns episode.
Do you guys think that DeAndre Ayton has any chance of Rookie of the Year, or is it already Luka Doncic's award?
I think he's carrying the baggage of that number 1 pick and the scrutiny that's going to come with it. And Doncic is playing without that anchor tethered around him. So the flashy things that Doncic is doing is going to give him probably the leg up in this. But that doesn't mean that DeAndre Ayton isn't worthy. He's still doing things that rookies at his position haven't done in this game.
I'm not saying worthy. I'm saying from the voter standpoint.
Luka Doncic is going to win Rookie of the Year. He just is, because everyone is enjoying his highlights every single game. and he's putting up the most points. And really, the Rookie of the Year has always been about who scored the most points. It really has. So he's definitely doing it. He's definitely flashy. He's definitely fun to watch. Does he have his flaws? Yes. Are his flaws being maximized on Twitter? No. Are people pointing out his? Here's an unrelated but related thing. Last year, the big debate was, if you guys, I don't know if you guys agree with me, but the last year the big debate was Donovan Mitchell versus Devin Booker. Remember that? Who's
Yes.
better?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure did disappear
I don't
quick.
know. Maybe you guys remember that. This year, Donovan Mitchell has been bad. And if you actually compare his second season to Devin Booker's second season, they're almost identical. In the Booker went through a dip in efficiency in the beginning of his second season where he was down at a 50% true shooting rate. When you with true shooting includes free throws and 3-pointers, 50% is kind of low for an elite guard. They're basically mirror images, although Booker did better on assisting and a little bit better on rebounding. Nobody is talking all of a sudden that Donovan Mitchell is an offense-only guy. And plus, Donovan Mitchell is not playing good defense this year either. Nobody's talking down Donovan Mitchell like they talked down Devin Booker in year 2. And for the same reason, and where this is related, is that nobody is focusing on Luka Doncic's deficiencies like they are DeAndre Ayton's. So in that regard, the same reason Donovan Mitchell was a Rookie of the Year last year, you're going to see Luka Doncic being the runaway Rookie of the Year this year. He's probably going to win every Player of the Month award too on the Western Conference. It just is what it is. That doesn't mean DeAndre Ayton isn't great. It just means that Luka Doncic is going to win it anyway.
The only way that gap can close is if the Suns actually continue a hot streak, really turn everything around, and then what DeAndre Ayton does well is going to start to get noticed because it's going to be believed that it's having an impact on a major turnaround.
One of the biggest reasons, right? One of the bigger reasons that Luka Doncic is right now a runaway Rookie of the Year is Dallas is a winning team.
Mm-hmm.
But you put a lot of veterans around a rookie, and you put one of the best coaches in the entire game designing an offense and a defense for that rookie, and you're going to have pretty good results. And the Suns don't have that kind of combination.
And on that note, let's go ahead and take a break. When we get back, we're going to give our initial thoughts on Kelly Oubre.